Hey guys, alright, you are at your, I guess, last lesson for Tinkercad. This isn't going to be so much of a lesson, just going over what you have to do, I guess. So I won't be using Tinkercad today because all the skills that you need for this you've already learnt over the past few weeks. So this is our last kind of activity, and you'll have the holidays to do it. I don't expect you to do your work in the holidays, but you'll also have till the second week back to get this done. So there's no rush. But when you have finished, just send me an email or comment on the classroom so I know, and I can try and 3D print it for you. Now, I'll share this slide with you so you can always go back and have a look at the information in it, but this is just going to be a short video, so I'm going to skip over this. So the task that you have to do, I wanted to leave this as kind of open-ended as possible for you guys because I know people have different interests, people want to make different things, so I didn't want to give you a specific set task to do, but what you are to do is design an object. You might like to sketch it first. That will be 3D printed. I will 3D print it. I would suggest making the object needs to be small. It can't be too big because if it's too big, it takes too long to print, and there's going to be quite a few things that I have to print. So try and keep it to the smaller scale. If it is too big, when I go to print it, I might scale it down. So you don't need to stress too much about that, but just to keep in mind. Another thing is don't go crazy with the details. Don't go overboard with your details. 3D printing is really good at picking up on details, but if things are too small, for example, um, I don't know, if things are too small, it won't work very well. And if they're at the wrong angle, which we'll talk about in a minute, it also won't work very well. So just keep that in mind. You can add detail to your design, definitely, because these are all quite detailed, especially this one here. But just don't go overboard with it. And you might like to think of a specific use for your creation. So I know some people are going to be doing key rings, other people are looking at fidget toys, other people are looking at containers for specific things. Before you do this, have an idea of what it is that you actually are going to create. So I will go through and show you some examples of things that are possible to make. But before we start that, I just wanted to touch on this degree rule, and it's called the 45 degree rule, and it's kind of one of the rules when looking at 3D printing that you should kind of try and stick by. You don't have to, but this here is the limit that a 3D printer can print to. So anything over 70 degrees, we know that 3D printing layers on top of each other. So you can imagine here if it went to do another layer and the 3D printer started printing here, the filament, the plastic is just going to fall down. Okay, so that's things like if you were going to design, if you're going to print a house with a second story and there's the flat part on top and there's nothing underneath it, it's not going to print because that floor would be 90 degrees, right? So the optimal printing is nothing over 45 degree angles. However, if your design does include different angles, that's okay. It should still print if it's below 70, and I'll talk about that in 1 second. Or I think once they're all done, I'll have to play around with some of the designs. So if your design's changed a little bit when it's printed, that's because I had to change it to actually allow it to print properly. I'll show you what I mean by these degrees here if I go over to here. So this box here is, I've moved this to a 45 degree angle. I'll show you what I mean. So if I was just to go, oops, let's duplicate this one and move it here to 45 degrees. This would still be able to print, okay? However, if it was connected to something like that maybe, right, that would still be able to print because it can build on the layers that's already there. However, if I was to get this piece and put it on a 90 degree angle and put it like this and attach it there, when I went to print this on the printer, it wouldn't print because it would be layering onto nothing here and the filament would just be falling down. So that's something to keep in mind. There are ways around that when I do the printing. I can add supports and things, but just try to limit the amount of, like 90 degree angle objects on your when you're doing your design. Also, one other thing to mention, we've talked about this a lot throughout our weeks on Tinkercad. Just make sure your design is fully connected. So for example, this cylinder on this box here, from this angle, right, it looks like they're joined together. However, if I went to print that, it would not work because there's a gap. So it's really important that your designs are joining. Okay, if they're not joining, it's not going to print. So you have to check all of your objects are actually touching each other. Um, so keep that in mind as well. Let's go back over here. All right, so I would suggest, because it's kind of broad and you can do lots of things, to maybe design a keyring. That's probably something, because it's small, you can design lots of different, there's different ways to design it. A keyring would be something cool, and you could put it on your bag, you could give it to a family member. It would be pretty cool to have something that you actually came from your brain and is a solid object. That's what I like about 3D printing. You can imagine something and then it kind of comes to life and you have the actual, finished product. With the keyrings, I'll order some of these chains, so you don't have to 3D design the chain onto your keyring. If you just have the loop here for it, we can actually attach the keychain part to it. There's some ideas, we've gone through those. This will be shared as well. Another few things, we talked about this in our Zoom. This one here I wanted to talk a little bit about, a little bit more. A car. Now, if you were just to print this car as it is, it wouldn't work, right? Because the wheels are joint. It's one solid, so it's not going to move forward. There are ways to actually fix that, and if you have a look here, this person has done that. So they've designed, and now I can print this because they've designed each specific part to their car on the work plane, and this car would actually work because if you have a look at it, you've got the body there, and they've made holes for the axles, which are here, right? And these axles go inside the hole. So obviously this hole is going to be a little bit bigger than this axle so that it has room to spin, right? Then they've designed their four wheels, which would probably be a tiny, tiny bit bigger than the axle so that you can slide it on and glue it on, right? Once the axle's through. That means the axle of the car would actually be able to move. So if you want to 3D print a toy or something with moving parts or things that move, have a look at this, and you can get some ideas from that. You can print parts separately, and you can see here on this design they've made a box, which they have done, right? They've made a lid for the box separately on the work plane, and they have made their the actual box, and they've also made these hinges with a hole through it. And then you can see here this bolt that they've printed would fit through there once the lid's on. Okay, so they've thought about, and they've obviously used the dimensions tool because they need to be very similar in size to figure out, and they've even put a thing on the front here so you can lock your box, right? I feel like that's for a lock. So that would be, a cool design where they've actually used, making different parts on the same work plane. Here is the same, a box with the lid next to it that fits inside the box, right? You can see these have been made separately, but they've probably used the dimensions so that it would actually fit perfectly inside. If I was to print the lid on top of the box, it would print as a solid, right? I wouldn't be able to get the lid off. So that's something else to think about. A Minecraft creeper, I wouldn't be printing the keyring on top. That's just an example of that would be something easy to do. Remembering that when we 3D print, it's not going to come out in color. I'll be using white filament, so you can always paint your designs once they're finished. And here's something cool. Someone's made a phone cover that actually works, so they've really thought about the dimensions. So they're just some ideas, guys. A spinning top, a toy. It's really up to you and what you want to do with this and how much time you want to put into it. I'll try my best to get everyone's print. Well, I will get everyone's printed, but I may have to change some of your designs depending if they work with the 3D printer. And if there's an issue with it, I'll let you know what I had to change before I printed it. So good luck, and when you get back to school next term, sometime you'll be able to come to me and get the keyring or get whatever you made actually printed. So good luck with it, have fun, and I'll see you first week back on Wednesday for our Zoom. We'll be moving on to something else next term. We won't be looking at Tinkercad. You've got the skills to, do your own stuff with that now. Um, but yeah, this won't be due until the second week of term. Okay. However, the earlier you get it done, the easier it is for me to print. So keep that in mind. All right. See you guys.